You won't believe how much each taxpayer in the United States owes on the national debt. And it's much worse than that because the interest rate on national debt has doubled in the last 2 years. The amount of money that the U.S. federal government is paying in interest has doubled in over 2 years, in the past 2 years, and amounts to $7,500 per year, just in interest, per taxpayer. So if you filled out your income taxes, if you paid somebody to fill out your income taxes, if at the end of filling out your income taxes, you ended up, some of your money ended up in the federal government's pocket, I'm not talking about just your refund, I'm talking about over the course of your withholding and filling out things, if you ended up actually having some of your money in the federal government's pocket, you are a taxpayer. And $7,500 this year is going to come out of taxpayers' pockets, each taxpayer's pocket, to just pay interest. This is going to break the entire system. This is what we keep saying, that this is completely unsustainable. This is a big, big problem. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant, and I'm going to walk you through just what the numbers, the national debt actually looks like and what the national debt and interest payments are going to look like next year. Do you know how much you owe as a taxpayer? We're going to talk about that. If you appreciate these videos, give us a thumbs up and let's dive into it. Now, it's no secret. Interest rates have been going up. If you've tried to get a loan, if you pay attention to all those updates you get from your credit card companies, and they're like, oh, by the way, we increased the interest rate on your credit card. Now, hopefully you're not actually paying any of those interest rates on your credit card, but if you do, or if you just notice that they've raised it, you know that interest rates are definitely going up. If you looked at what a mortgage would look like nowadays, and it's a lot higher than what it used to be, isn't it? Interest rates are definitely going up, and let's say it this way. The amount of interest that Americans are paying just overall is skyrocketing. It is now over 2.5% of the U.S. economy are interest payments now. You know, you got your principal payments, that's you paying back the money that you borrowed, but then you got the interest payments, of course. And 2.5% of the entire U.S. economy is interest payments. Now, that's not really productive money, and that is definitely not a good sign. And the U.S. federal government owing $33.6 trillion as of today. That all is paying out interest. Now, the federal government usually pays a much lower interest rate than you or I do, even though we may buy a house and that's a secured loan. There's an asset behind that, whereas the federal government has no assets behind all of its loans, and somehow they get lower interest rates than us. That's just another scam out there if you just want to add all of them up. But how much is that of that is your share? $303,000 per taxpayer as of today. A little bit over that, but let's just say $303,000 per taxpayer. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, well, there's some billionaires out there going to pay it for me. Yeah, well, the billionaires have all sorts of accountants. I'm a tax accountant, so I understand how that works. And they can get away with not really paying taxes if they don't want to. Now, someone else will have to pay it down the road, but they're very good at getting out of paying taxes. Yeah, sure, they may have to build some windmills offshore and kill a bunch of whales, but you know, they'll find a way to kind of pay a lot less taxes than they need to. Really, when it comes down to it, middle-class Americans are the ones who pay the lion's share of the income tax out there, and that's just the way it is. Sales tax for most of the states falls heavily upon you and I's, but $303,000 of debt. If you have a child and they're born this year, they're born with $303,000 worth of debt, and you just watch, by the end of this year, you may be looking at $304,000, $305,000 or more. So, how many taxpayers are in the United States, you might ask? Well, according to IRS numbers, approximately 111 million people are actually filing a tax return that shows that they owe at least some income taxes. Now, they may have withheld and they may get a refund, but they're still paying in overall. Now, that's how many tax returns. So a bunch of these people are married. So if they married filing jointly, that counts that way. If you're a kid, of course, you don't file tax returns, usually, unless you're making money. And if you're making money as a kid, good for you. That's the type of American spirit we need in order to pay off our national debt, right? We need kids working. We need everybody working in order to pay off our national debt. This is just, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because we're not going to pay off our national debt. Like, you know it, I know it. When I tell you that every taxpayer needs to chip in $303,000 in order to make this tax debt go away, this national debt go away, you and I know that's not going to happen. Like, that just can't happen. It's not feasible to happen. A lot of people out there in the United States are hoping that they make $303,000, in their lifetime, right? That isn't that the truth? Average taxpayers out there are making like what, $55,000? Yeah, so 6 years. Let's all just work the next 6 years of our lives in order to pay these taxes. We don't get to eat. We don't get to pay for our rent, anything like that. 6 years of just working in order to pay off our tax debt. So that's just not going to happen. You know that. So this coming year, which just started, we're now in the new fiscal year. We're in fiscal year 2024. Congress hasn't passed a budget, but is that really a big surprise? They haven't passed a budget since like early, 2001 or something like that. Anyway, they haven't passed a budget since forever. But we're in a new tax year, a new fiscal year for the federal government. And this year, like I said, each taxpayer is going to be responsible for $7,500 worth of interest. Are you seeing how that might be a little bit unsustainable? So the federal government, just imagine them reaching into your bank account, pulling out $7,500 from your family's bank account. Whoever you file taxes with, and then that money is just going to go just to pay interest on the federal government. Not pay down the debt, just keep us where we are. And the next year after that, in 2025, we're projecting $8,288. I should have rounded that up to $8,300, per taxpayer. Yeah, it's growing bigger and bigger. If you had credit card debt, or if you had debt out there that you were paying $8,000 of interest per year, we would probably say that you are needing to go into bankruptcy, right? Most folks can't handle $8,000 worth of interest in addition to, trying to repay back whatever, all that money that's owed. Friends, you and I are absolutely bankrupt if you are a U.S. citizen. That's where we are with things. And anyone who tries to spin that away, it's not that big of a deal. Friends, it is absolutely a big deal. And like I said, we're not going to pay back this debt. It's just not going to happen. It can't happen. It physically can't really happen. So what's going to happen to this? Either the U.S. government is just going to flat out default on this debt, which is going to make it really, really hard to borrow money in the future. And everyone who's stuck holding that debt, like U.S. banks, are going to go bankrupt as well. And, that would be the most honest thing to do. But we know that the politicians in Washington, D.C. are definitely not going to do the honest solution, right? I mean, if you think a chance out there of them doing the honest solution and being honest with everybody, yeah, we're not going to pay back that debt. It's just not going to happen. So we're just going to write that off. And if you loaned us money, knowing how irresponsible we are, it's kind of your fault, right? and the United States would just move on. There would be a lot of banks that would implode. Tons of investors would lose so much money. But that'd mostly be the top 1%, the top 10% of Americans would be the ones who would suffer the pain of that, and all the foreign countries out there that are holding U.S. Treasury bills. It'd be a betrayal of like no end. But that's where we're living. That's the truth of the matter. So if they're not going to do the honest thing and just say, we know that we're never going to repay that debt, and you know that we're never going to repay that debt. If they don't do that, they're going to keep pretending that we're going to repay this debt. Now, let's be honest. All the banks out there are holding this debt not because they expect the federal government to pay them off eventually. They're expecting that they can shuffle this debt over to someone else before it explodes. So, honestly, it really is their fault. People who have been loaning free money to the federal government are the problem, just as much as the politicians who are borrowing all this money. It's an obligation of the lender to actually check to see if the borrower has any intention of repaying. So we've talked about inflation. That's the dishonest way of dealing with this. Instead of punishing the people who loan the federal government all this money, they're going to punish everyone. Not just everyone in the United States, but they're going to punish everyone around the world too that uses the US dollar. So even if you don't have any treasury bills, you don't have any savings bonds, you've never loaned the federal government money, you've never entered into willingly loaning the federal government money, if you just have any transactions in dollars, if you touch dollars, if you have dollars in your bank account, if you have assets that are basically priced in dollars, you're going to pay this national debt off little by little over the coming years, and it's going to devastate your wealth. They're just going to take all of your wealth and just make it go away. Not only is this debt going to cause that to happen, but all the debt of the bankers, all the banks that owe tons and tons of money, all the companies that have borrowed tons and tons of money, all your neighbors, if you're out of debt, all your neighbors who are in debt are going to take your wealth. You see how unjust that is? Who's going to win out in these coming months, in these coming years? It's going to be the people who owe debt, because the debt that they owe is going to just kind of decrease in value. They owe $100,000 in today's dollars. Well, they're going to get to pay them back $100,000 in future dollars, which are going to be practically worthless. So, if you want to just get a pad of paper, and pull off 100,000 sheets of that and pay back that way, or actually that'd be kind of expensive. That's a lot of paper. Let's say each sheet of paper is like $100. Just get a pad of paper and pay back your $100,000 loan in the future, because that's going to be about how much the value of dollars are going to be. They're going to make out like a bandit. They got to buy stuff now with future dollars. They're going to be worthless. And who's going to lose out the worst? If you have your money parked at a bank, they're using your money to go freely distribute that to everyone else. And when you finally get that money back, it's going to be worthless. You put in value and you're going to get back garbage. Any savers, anyone who has money that is in dollars, you're going to find out the difference between currency and money. There is a difference. If you have currency, U.S. currency, you're going to find out that is not worth the paper that's printed on, because it's fancy paper, and really what you have is just a cool little souvenir. There's going to be a lot of those floating around in the future, and they're not going to be worth a whole lot. We have a big, big problem coming right at us. And that's not even talking about what's happening over in the Middle East or in Europe or all these other problems we have coming before us. The simple fact is that we've dug a terrible, terrible hole. For anyone who's ever gotten into debt and gotten into trouble with that, anyone who's known other people who's gotten into trouble, or you at least understand how it works. We are approaching the moment where it becomes more expensive to borrow money. We can't afford to borrow enough money to pay our payments. When we cross that moment, that's when we just completely implode and we'll effectively default. And we're approaching that fast. 5%. We're almost at 5% interest rate on 10-year treasuries. And the market is rightly freaking out over that because they're starting to see how each individual taxpayer now owes almost $8,000 per year just in interest. That's just crazy talk. They know that that's just stupid. Hopefully Americans start realizing how stupid it is. If you realize how stupid that is, you would know that as you get your dollars, you need to be putting them into hard assets. You need to be buying things. Paying down debt is always a good plan out there. It will make you a little safer. But buying assets, and we do like silver and gold and those type of assets, but we like even more food. Food that you're going to eat anyway. Paper products that you're going to use anyway. Buy more paper towels. Buy the stuff that you're going to buy anyway. And if you still have money, then buy physical assets. That is going to be the winning move out there. If you can get a really low interest loan, or if you have a really interest loan, this is the controversial point I'm going to make here, and I'm speaking as an accountant. You're going to make out well. If you have a low interest loan that is lower interest than the inflation rate is, you're effectively making that money. So you're kind of actually better off not paying it back. Still a good move to pay back loans, generally speaking. But I'm just telling you who's going to win and who's going to lose as this thing goes forward. If you have a mortgage out at under 5%, I don't know. I mean, it's good to pay it off, but at the same time, if you're just playing the numbers, you'd be better off not and paying it back later. Now, if bankers get smart out there, like they do in hyperinflationary situations, they will remark your debt up to a higher level. They'll basically start adding zeros to your debt in order to keep the value of your debt pegged to something else. So basically, they'll say that your debt, say you have $100,000 out mortgage on your home. They'll say, well, actually, we're going to peg that to the euro, or we're going to peg that to the Swiss franc. And so even though the US dollar is dropping in value, they're going to hold that value about the same and say that your interest payments, your mortgage payments are going to go up. As inflation goes up, your payments are going to go up. We've seen that happen out there. We have. In hyperinflationary environments, they change the terms on you. And there are clauses buried in your mortgage to make that very thing happen sometimes. Might want to go back and reread that thing very carefully. All right, folks, that's what I got for you today. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.